It was supposed to be the happiest night of her life. The champagne was still cold, the dress still perfect. But what she found behind that door triggered a chain of events no one could have predicted. By morning, one of them would be in handcuffs, and the other would vanish without a trace. How did a moment of betrayal turn into a national mystery? This is the story of Elena Morris, Daniel Harper, and a woman no one really knew. A story that begins with infidelity, but ends somewhere far darker. Somewhere none of them expected. The bride, 29-year-old Elena Morris. A woman who believed in love, in second chances, in happy endings. The groom, Daniel Harper. Wealthy, admired. The kind of man people called lucky. And the maid. A woman hired just days before the wedding. A woman with no social media, no past anyone could verify, no one they invited into their lives. But here's what no one could answer. Was it an accident or a setup? Why did the maid disappear within hours of the incident? And why did Daniel's story keep changing every time he told it? By the time investigators arrived, the hotel suite looked like a crime scene. And the truth was still hiding. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button, like and share, so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Let's go back to the beginning. Elena Morris grew up in Minneapolis, the daughter of a school teacher and a mechanic. She wasn't rich, she didn't come from privilege, but she had something many people search for their whole lives. She had hope. Friends described her as warm, loyal, the kind of person who remembered your birthday and checked in when you were quiet for too long. She worked as a project coordinator at a nonprofit, helping low-income families find housing. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered to her. And when she met Daniel Harper at a charity gala 3 years ago, she thought she'd found someone who valued the same things. Daniel was different from the men she'd dated before. He was confident, successful, the owner of a mid-sized construction company that had been growing steadily for years. He wore tailored suits and drove a black Audi. But more than that, he made her feel seen. He'd text her good morning. He'd ask about her day. He made her laugh. For the first year, everything felt easy. But by the second year, small cracks started to show. He'd cancel plans last minute, blaming work. He stopped going to premarital counseling after just 2 sessions, saying he didn't need a stranger telling him how to love. Elena's friends noticed he was on his phone constantly, even during dinner. But when they asked her about it, she defended him. She said he was stressed. She said he was building something. She said it was temporary. And maybe she believed it. Or maybe she just wanted to. The engagement happened on a beach in California. Sunset. A violinist. A ring that cost more than Elena made in 6 months. It was perfect. At least, that's how it looked in the photos. Daniel posted it everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. People congratulated them. People called them couple goals. But behind the filtered images, something was shifting. Elena started finding receipts for things he wouldn't explain. Late-night charges at restaurants she'd never been to. Cash withdrawals that didn't match his usual spending. When she asked, he got defensive. He'd say she was being paranoid. He'd accuse her of not trusting him. And every time, she'd apologize. She'd tell herself she was overthinking. But deep down, a voice whispered, "Something isn't right." Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button, like, and share so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The wedding was held at the Grand Riviera Hotel, a historic venue just outside Minneapolis. 200 guests. An outdoor ceremony. White roses everywhere. Elena walked down the aisle in a dress she'd been dreaming about since she was 12. Her father cried. Her mother clutched a tissue. Daniel stood at the altar in a navy suit, smiling. And for a moment, everything felt right again. The vows were traditional. Daniel promised to love her in sickness and in health. Elena promised to stand by him no matter what. They kissed, people cheered, The reception was a blur of dancing, toasts, and laughter. Elena's best friend gave a speech that made everyone cry. Daniel's brother joked about how long it took him to propose. By 11 p.m., most of the guests had left. Elena and Daniel were supposed to head to their honeymoon suite on the top floor, but just before midnight, Elena realized she'd forgotten her phone in the bridal prep room downstairs. She told Daniel she'd be right back. He nodded, said he'd be waiting. She took the elevator down, grabbed her phone, and noticed a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. Blurry, taken from a distance. It showed Daniel standing too close to someone. A woman. Elena's stomach twisted. She tried to zoom in, but the image was too grainy. She stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it. She told herself it was nothing, someone playing a prank. But her hands were shaking as she rode the elevator back up. When she reached the suite, the door was slightly open. Not wide, just a crack, enough to hear something. Voices. Low. Urgent. She pushed the door open slowly, and that's when she saw them. Daniel, and a woman in a hotel uniform. The maid. They were on the couch. His shirt was half unbuttoned. Her hair was messy, and for a second, no one moved. Elena stood frozen in the doorway, her bouquet still in her hand. The flowers she'd carried down the aisle just hours ago. Daniel shot to his feet. His face went pale. The woman, the maid, stood up too, but she didn't run. She just stared at Elena with an expression that wasn't guilt. It was something else, something colder. Elena's voice came out as a whisper. "What is this?" Daniel stammered. He said it wasn't what it looked like. He said she walked in on something she didn't understand. But Elena wasn't listening anymore. She turned and walked out. She didn't slam the door. She didn't scream. She just left. And 30 minutes later, someone called 911. The police arrived at 12:43 a.m. Officers found the suite in disarray. A broken glass on the floor. A pillow on the ground. Elena was sitting in the hallway outside the room, still in her wedding dress, staring at nothing. Daniel was inside, pacing. And the maid? She was gone. Daniel told officers it was a misunderstanding. He said the maid had come to the room to drop off extra towels. He said things got out of hand, but nothing happened. He said Elena overreacted and the maid got scared and left. But when officers checked the security footage, the story didn't add up. The footage showed the maid entering the suite at 11:15 p.m. But there was no record of her leaving the building. Not through the lobby, not through the side exits, not through the parking garage. She'd entered the elevator on the 10th floor at 11:52 p.m., just minutes before Elena came back. But after that, nothing. She didn't get off on any other floor. She didn't leave through the stairwell. She was just gone. Officers searched the hotel. They checked every room, every closet, every storage area. They found her employee locker in the staff break room. Inside was a purse with no ID, no phone, just some cash and a pack of gum. Her employee file listed her name as Grace Lawson. But when they ran that name, nothing came up. No driver's license, no social security number, no previous addresses. It was like she didn't exist. Meanwhile, Daniel's story kept changing. First, he said she brought towels. Then he said she asked to use the bathroom. Then he said she came on to him and he didn't know how to say no. Each version sounded less believable than the last. Elena refused to speak to investigators that night. She sat in silence, her hands folded in her lap, her mascara streaked down her face. But the next morning, she gave a short statement. She said she walked in and saw them together. She said Daniel tried to lie. She said the woman looked at her like she'd been expecting her. That last detail caught the attention of Detective Maria Ruiz, the lead investigator. Why would the maid expect Elena to walk in? Was this planned? By the third day, the case had gone public. Local news picked it up first. Wedding night betrayal turns into mystery. Then national outlets followed. Social media exploded. People took sides. Some blamed Daniel. Some blamed the maid. Some even blamed Elena for leaving the room. Witnesses from the wedding started coming forward. A guest said they saw Daniel arguing with a woman in the parking lot during the reception. Another said the maid had been watching the ceremony from a back hallway, even though she wasn't supposed to be working that day. A bartender claimed Daniel tipped him $200 and told him to keep quiet about something, though he didn't say what. Every new detail made the story messier, and then investigators found something in Daniel's car. A suitcase. Not his. Not Elena's. It belonged to the maid. Inside were clothes, toiletries, and a burner phone with only one contact saved. The contact name? D. If you are still here, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button, like and share, so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The discovery of the suitcase changed everything. Forensic teams found Daniel's fingerprints all over it, on the handle, on the zippers, even on some of the items inside. When confronted, Daniel claimed he'd never seen the suitcase before. He said someone must have planted it, but the evidence didn't support that. The suitcase had been in his trunk for at least 2 days, based on soil samples and pollen found on the fabric. That meant it was there before the wedding. Investigators dug deeper into Daniel's life, and what they found was a man drowning in secrets. His construction company, which everyone believed was thriving, was actually on the verge of bankruptcy. He owed nearly $400,000 to various creditors. Loans he'd taken out in the company's name, loans he'd personally guaranteed. He'd been hiding it from Elena, hiding it from his family, hiding it from everyone. But the most shocking discovery came from his bank records. Over the past 6 months, Daniel had been making regular transfers to an account under the name Lawson, the same last name as the maid. $500 here, $1,000 there, sometimes more. The transactions were labeled as consulting fees, but there was no contract, no invoices, no proof of any legitimate business relationship. Investigators reached out to the bank to trace the account. It had been opened 4 months ago with a fake ID and a P.O. box address that didn't exist. Whoever Grace Lawson was, she'd been planning this for a while. But planning what? That's when the encrypted phone found in the suitcase became critical. Tech specialists spent days trying to crack it. When they finally did, they found a trail of messages between Daniel and someone using the initial G. The messages were vague but disturbing. In one, Daniel wrote, "I can't keep doing this. We need to end it." G responded, "You don't get to decide when this ends." In another exchange, G wrote, "She's going to find out eventually. You know that, right?" Daniel replied, "Not if we're careful." The final message, sent 2 days before the wedding, was the most chilling. G wrote, "Saturday night, stick to the plan." Daniel never responded. When investigators showed Elena the messages, she broke down. She said she'd had no idea. She said Daniel told her he loved her. She said she felt like a fool. But then, she said something that made Detective Ruiz pause. Elena said, "I don't think he was the only one lying." The investigation shifted. If Daniel was hiding a financial collapse, and if Grace was using a fake identity, then maybe this wasn't just about infidelity. Maybe it was something bigger. Fraud, blackmail, extortion. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture they formed was still incomplete. And then, on the 9th day after the wedding, Daniel was arrested. The charges? Conspiracy to commit fraud and obstruction of justice. His bail was set at $250,000. He couldn't post it. The same man who'd thrown a wedding that cost $60,000 couldn't come up with bail money, because the money was never his to begin with. On the 12th day, everything changed again. Grace Lawson walked into a police station in Cedar Falls, Iowa, nearly 200 miles away. She was calm, composed. She asked to speak to someone about the Elena Morris case. Detective Ruiz drove out to interview her personally, and what Grace said turned the entire investigation upside down. She admitted her real name wasn't Grace Lawson. It was Sophie Brennan. She was 31 years old, originally from Ohio. She had no criminal record, but she did have a history of working temporary jobs under different names. She said she'd met Daniel 6 months earlier at a business expo in Chicago. He approached her. He was charming, flirtatious. He told her he was separated from his fiancée. He said he needed help with a financial project. He offered her $5,000 up front just to listen. She said yes. According to Sophie, Daniel's plan was simple. He needed to hide money from his creditors and from Elena. He wanted Sophie to open accounts under a false identity and hold the money temporarily. In exchange, he'd pay her a percentage. It was illegal, but Sophie said she was desperate. She'd been evicted twice that year. She had medical debt. She took the deal. But then, Daniel started asking for more. He wanted her to get a job at the hotel where the wedding was being held. He said it would only be for one night. He said he just needed her to create a distraction so he could move money without Elena noticing. Sophie didn't understand why, but he paid her another $3,000, so she went along with it. The night of the wedding, Daniel told her to come to the suite at 11:15. He said Elena would be gone. He said they'd stage a small argument, make it look like he was stressed, and then Sophie would leave. That was it. But when Elena walked in earlier than expected, everything fell apart. Sophie said Daniel panicked. He told her to run. She took the service elevator to the basement and left through a loading dock that wasn't monitored by cameras. She stayed in a motel for a few days, then decided to turn herself in because she realized how bad it looked. She said she never slept with Daniel. She said the scene Elena walked in on was staged but made to look real. She said Daniel wanted Elena to think he'd cheated so she'd be too emotional to ask questions about the money. Detective Ruiz asked the obvious question. If you're telling the truth, why did Daniel have your suitcase? Sophie's face went pale. She said she didn't know. She'd left the suitcase in her motel room. She had no idea how it ended up in Daniel's car. That's when investigators realized there was still a missing piece. Someone else had access to that suitcase. Someone who knew where Sophie was staying. Someone who moved it to Daniel's car to frame him further. Or to frame Sophie. Or both. Forensic teams went back to the hotel. They reviewed every second of security footage from that night. And at 11:38 p.m., just minutes before Elena returned to the suite, a third person appeared in the hallway outside the room. The figure was wearing a hotel uniform, but the face was turned away from the camera. The person knocked on the door. Daniel opened it. They spoke for less than a minute. Then the person left. Investigators compared the body type, the walk, the height. It wasn't Sophie. It wasn't Elena. It wasn't anyone on the hotel staff. It was someone they'd never identified. Someone who knew exactly when to show up and exactly how to disappear. And whoever that person was, they were still out there. So where does that leave us? Daniel is awaiting trial. He's facing up to 7 years in prison if convicted. Sophie, now back to using her real name, accepted a plea deal. She'll serve 6 months for identity fraud and conspiracy. She's cooperating with investigators. Elena filed for an annulment. The marriage was dissolved within 3 weeks. She moved back in with her parents. She deleted all her social media. She's trying to rebuild a life that was shattered in one night. But the mystery remains. Who was the third person in that hallway? Why did they go to the suite? And what did they say to Daniel that made him so calm just minutes before everything exploded? Some investigators believe it was an accomplice. Someone Daniel hired to make sure Sophie played her part. Others think it was someone from Daniel's past. A creditor, a partner, someone with their own agenda. The case is still open. The FBI is now involved because of the interstate fraud. But so far, no arrests, no new leads, just questions. Here's what we know for certain. Daniel Harper was a man living a double life. He wasn't the successful businessman everyone thought he was. He was drowning. And he was willing to destroy the people around him to stay afloat. Sophie Brennan made a choice. A desperate one. And it cost her 6 months of her life and a criminal record she'll carry forever. Elena Morris trusted the wrong person. And on what should have been the happiest night of her life, she learned that love doesn't always protect you from betrayal. But here's the question I'll leave you with. Do you believe Sophie's story? Do you think she was just a pawn, or was she more involved than she's letting on? And what about Daniel? Was he a master manipulator? Or was he being manipulated too? What would you have done if you were Elena? Would you have walked away? Would you have stayed to get answers? Would you have fought back? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think really happened that night. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If you love true crime mysteries and real-life twists, hit that subscribe button, because next time we're covering a story that's even more unbelievable. A couple disappears on a honeymoon cruise, but the ship's cameras show something impossible, something that still has no explanation. You won't want to miss it.